What is up, everybody? We're on day 96 of our Bible in a Year series. We're in 2 Samuel still. We've got today and tomorrow still in 2 Samuel, and then we're on to 1 Kings. So it'll be fun, interesting, awesome stuff. A lot of really good stuff still coming up. Even in the 2 days we have left in 2 Samuel, like, it's not over. This isn't necessarily just they wind it down and cruise to the end of the book. There's still some pretty good stuff coming up. So make sure you stick around for that, and we will jump straight in. We're reading out of the CSB. It'll be on the screen if you are interested in reading along. Chapter 19. It was reported to Joab, the king is weeping. He's mourning over Absalom. That day's victory was turned into mourning for all the troops, because on that day the troops heard the king is grieving over his son. So they returned to the city quietly that day, like troops come in when they are humiliated after fleeing in battle. But the king covered his face and cried loudly, "My son Absalom, Absalom, my son, my son." Then Joab went into the house of the king and said, "Today," okay, I love Joab. If nothing else, for this here, I think he is spot on. I think God will send people like this into your life who, I actually wrote, if anyone doesn't know, How to Fail at Practically Everything, a Comprehensive Guide. And in this book, I have a chapter about letting people, find people that care enough about you to hurt your feelings, essentially. And it's good to have some people that are not going to sugarcoat stuff. They're going to tell you the hard truths because you need to hear it. This is what Joab's about to do. Verse 5. Then Joab went into the house to the king and said, "Today you have shamed all your soldiers, those who saved your life, as well as your sons, your wives, and your concubines, by loving your enemies and hating those who love you. Today you have made it clear that the commanders and soldiers mean nothing to you. In fact, today I know that if Absalom were alive and all of us were dead, it would be fine with you. Now get up, go out, and encourage your soldiers. For I swear by the Lord that if you don't go out, not a man will remain with you tonight. This will be worse for you than all the trouble that has come to you from your youth until now." So the king got up and sat in the city gate, and all the people were told, "Look, the king is sitting in the city gate." Then they all came into the king's presence. Meanwhile, each Israelite had fled to his tent. People throughout all the tribes of Israel were arguing among themselves, saying, "The king rescued us from the grasp of our enemies, and he saved us from the grasp of the Philistines. But now he has fled from the land because of Absalom. But Absalom, the man we anointed over us, has died in battle. So why do you say nothing about restoring the king?" King David sent word to the priests Zadok and Abiathar, "Say to the elders of Judah, why should you be the last to restore the king to his palace? The talk of all Israel has reached the king at his house. You are my brothers, my flesh and my blood. So why should you be at the last to restore the king? And tell Amasa, aren't you my flesh and blood? May God punish me and do so severely if you don't become commander of my army from now on instead of Joab." So he won over all the men of Judah, and they unanimously sent word back to the king, "Come back, you and all your servants." Then the king returned. When he arrived at the Jordan, Judah came to Gilgal to meet the king and escort him across the Jordan. Shimei, son of Gera, the Benjaminite from Bahurim, Benjaminite from Bahurim, hurried down with the men of Judah to meet King David. There were 1,000 men from Benjamin with him. Ziba, an attendant from the house of Saul, with his 15 sons and 20 servants, also rushed down to the Jordan ahead of the king. They forded the Jordan to bring the king's household across and do whatever the king desired. When Shimei, son of Gera, crossed the Jordan, he fell face down before the king and said to him, My lord, don't hold me guilty, and don't remember your servant's wrongdoing on the day my lord the king left Jerusalem. May the king not take it to heart, for your servant knows that I have sinned. But look, today I am the first one to enter of the entire house of Joseph to come to meet my lord the king. Abishai, son of Zerah, asked, Shouldn't Shimei be put to death for this, because he cursed the Lord's anointed? David answered, Son of Zerah, do we agree on anything? Have you become my adversary today? Should any man be killed in Israel today? Am I not aware that today I'm king over Israel? So the king said to Shimei, You will not die. Then the king gave him his oath. So, he's working to restore his kingdom. Mephibosheth, Saul's grandson, also went down to meet the king. He had not taken care of his feet, trimmed his mustache, or washed his clothes from the day the king left until the day he returned safely. When he came from Jerusalem to meet the king asked him, Mephibosheth, why didn't you come with me? My lord the king, he replied, my servant Ziba betrayed me. Actually, your servant said, I'll saddle the donkey for myself, so that I may ride it and go with the king, for your servant is lame. Ziba slandered your servant to my lord the king. My lord the king is like an angel of God, so do whatever you think best. For my grandfather's entire family deserves death from my lord the king, but you set your servant among those who eat at your table. So what further right do I have to keep on making appeals to the king? The king said to him, Why keep on speaking about these matters of yours? I hereby declare you and Ziba are to divide the land. Mephibosheth said to the king, Instead, since my lord the king has come to his palace safely, let Ziba take it all. Barzillai, the Gileadite, had come home from Rogelim and accompanied the king to the Jordan River. To see him off at the Jordan, Barzillai was a very old man, 80 years old, and since he was a very wealthy man, he had provided for the needs of the king while he stayed in Mahanaim. The king said to Barzillai, Cross over with me, and I'll provide for you. At my side in Jerusalem, Barzillai replied to the king, How many years of my life are left that I should go up to Jerusalem with the king? I'm now 80 years old. Can I discern what is pleasant and what is not? Can your servant taste what he eats or drinks? Can I still hear the voice of male or female singers? Why should your servant be an added burden to the Lord the king? Since your servant is only going with the king a little way across the Jordan, why should the king repay me with such a reward? Please let your servant return, so that I may die in my own city near the tomb of my father and mother. But here is your servant Shimei. Let him cross over with my lord the king. Do for him what seems good to you. The king replied, Shimei will cross over with me, and I will do for him what seems good to you. And whatever you desire from me, I will do for you. So all the people crossed the Jordan, and then the king crossed. The king kissed Barzillai and blessed him, and Barzillai returned to his home. The king went on to Gilgal, and Shimei went with him. All the troops of Judah and half of Israel escorted the king. Suddenly, all the men of Israel came to the king. They asked him, Why did our brothers, the men of Judah, take you away secretly and transport the king and his household across the Jordan, along with all of David's men? All the men of Judah responded to the men of Israel, Because the king is our relative. Why does this make you angry? Have we ever eaten anything of the king's or been honored at all? The men of Israel answered the men of Judah, We have 10 shares of the king, so we have a greater claim to David than you. Why then do you despise us? Weren't we first to speak of restoring our king? But the words of the men of Judah were harsher than those of the men of Israel. So there's some infighting a little bit. With the beginning, I forgot to stop and actually talk about this. With the beginning, where we see Joab address David, right? There is no. I did stop and talk about it. Never mind. I'm losing it. Chapter 20. Now, a wicked man, a Benjamite, named Sheba, son of Bichri, happened to be there. He blew the ram's horn and shouted, "We have no portion in David, no inheritance in Jesse's son, each man to his tent, Israel." So all the men of Israel deserted David and followed Sheba, son of Bichri. But the men of Judah, from the Jordan all the way to the Jerusalem, may remain loyal to their king. When David came to his palace in Jerusalem, he took the 10 concubines he had left to take care of the palace and placed them under guard. He provided for them, but he was not intimate with them. They were confined until the day of their death, living as widows. The king of Amasa summoned the men of Judah, or the king said to Amasa, "Summon the men of Judah to me within 3 days, and be here yourself." Amasa went to summon Judah, but he took longer than the time allotted him. So David said to Abishai, "Sheba, son of Bichri, will do more harm to us than Absalom. Take your Lord's soldiers and pursue him, or he will find fortified cities and elude us." So Joab's men, the Cherethites, the Pelethites, and all the warriors marched out under Abishai's command. They left Jerusalem to pursue Sheba, son of Bichri. They were at the great stone in Gibeon when Amasa joined them. Joab was wearing his uniform, and over it was a belt around his waist with a sword in its sheath. As he approached, the sword fell out. Joab asked Amasa, "Are you well, my brother?" Then with his right hand, Joab grabbed Amasa by the beard to kiss him. Amasa was not on guard duty, the sword in Joab's hand, and Joab stabbed. Amasa was not on guard against the sword in Joab's hand, and Joab stabbed him in the stomach with it and spilled his intestines out on the ground. Joab did not stab him again, and Amasa died. Joab and his brother Abishai pursued Sheba, son of Bichri. One of Joab's young men had stood over Amasa, saying, "Whoever favors Joab and whoever is for David, follow Joab." Now Amasa had been writhing in his blood in the middle of the highway, and the man had seen that all the troops stopped. So he moved Amasa from the highway to the field and threw a garment over him, because he realized that all those who encountered Amasa were stopping. When he was removed from the highway, all the men passed by and followed Joab to pursue Sheba, son of Bichri. Sheba passed through all the tribes of Israel to Abel of Beth Makkah. All the Berites came together and followed him. Joab's troops came and besieged Sheba and Abel of Beth Makkah. They built a siege ram against the outer wall of the city, while all the troops with Joab were battering the wall to make it collapse. A wise woman called out from the city, Listen, please tell Joab to come here and let me speak with him." When he had come near her, the woman asked, "Are you Joab?" "I am," he replied. "Listen to the words of your servant," she said to him. He answered, "I'm listening." She said, "In the past they used to say, 'Seek counsel and Abel,' and that's how they settled disputes. I am one of the peaceful and faithful in Israel, but you're trying to destroy a city that is like a mother in Israel. Why would you devour the Lord's inheritance?" Joab protested, "Never. I would never devour or demolish. This is not the case. There's a man named Sheba, son of Bichri, from the hill country in Ephraim, who has rebelled against King David. Deliver this one man, and I will withdraw from the city." The woman replied to Joab, "Watch, his head will be thrown over the wall to you." The woman went to all the people with her wise counsel, and they cut off the head of Sheba, son of Bichri, and threw it to Joab. So he blew the ram's horn, and they dispersed from the city, each to his own tent. Joab returned to the king in Jerusalem. Joab commanded the whole army of Israel. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, was over the Cherethites and Pelanthites. Adoram was over forced labor. Jehoshaphat, son of Ahilud, was court historian. Shiva was court secretary. Zadok and Abiathar were priests. And in addition, Ira, the Jerite, was David's priest. Okay. Next chapter, chapter 21. During David's reign, there was a famine for 3 successive years. So David inquired of the Lord. The Lord answered, "It is due to Saul and his bloody family, because he killed the Gibeonites." The Gibeonites were not Israelites, but rather a remnant of the Amorites. The Israelites had taken an oath concerning them, but Saul had tried to kill them in his zeal for the Israelites and Judah. So David summoned the Gibeonites and spoke to them. He asked the Gibeonites, "What should I do for you? How can I make atonement so that you will bring a blessing on the Lord's inheritance?" The Gibeonites said to him, "We are not asking for silver and gold from Saul or his family, and we cannot put anyone to death in Israel. Whatever you say, I will do," he said. They replied to the king, "As for the man who annihilated us and plotted to destroy us, so we would not exist in the whole territory of Israel, let 7 of his male descendants be handed over to us, so we may hang them in the presence of the Lord at Gibeah of Saul. The Lord's chosen." The king answered, "I will hand them over." David spared Mephibosheth, the son of Saul's son, Jonathan, because of the oath of the Lord that was between David and Jonathan, Saul's son. But the king took Armani and Mephibosheth, who were the 2 sons of Rizpah, daughter of Aiah, had borne to Saul, and the 5 sons were whom Merab, daughter of Saul, had borne to Adriel, son of Barzillai, the Meholathite, and handed them over to the Gibeonites. They hanged them on the hill in the presence of the Lord. The 7 of them died together. They were executed in the first days of the harvest, at the beginning of the barley harvest. Rizpah, Aiah's daughter, took sackcloth and spread it out for herself on the rock from the beginning of the harvest until the rain poured down from heaven on the bodies. She kept the birds of the sky away from them by day and the wild animals by night. When it was reported to David that Saul's concubine, Rizpah, daughter of Aiah, had done, he went and got the bones of Saul and his son Jonathan from the citizens of Jabesh Gilead. They had stolen them from the public square of Beth Shan, where the Philistines had hung the bodies the day the Philistines killed Saul in Gilboa. David had the bones brought from there. They gathered up the bones of Saul's family who had been hanged, and buried the bones of Saul and his son Jonathan at Zelah in the land of Benjamin, in the tomb of Saul's father Kish. They did everything the king commanded. After this, God was receptive to prayer for the land. The Philistines again waged war against Israel. David went down with his soldiers, and they fought the Philistines, but David became exhausted. Then Ishbi-Benob, one of the descendants of the giant, whose bronze spear weighed about 8 pounds, and who wore new armor, intended to kill David, but Abishai, son of Zerah, came to his aid, struck the Philistine, and killed him. Then David's men swore to him, "You must never go out with us to battle. You must not extinguish the lamp of Israel." After this, there was another battle with the Philistines at Gob. At this time, Sibbecai, the Hushathite, killed Saph, who was one of the descendants of the giant. Once again, there was a battle with the Philistines at Gob, and Elhanan, son of Jair-Oregim, the Bethlehemite, killed Goliath at Gath. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam. At Gath, there was still another battle. A huge man was there, 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 in all. He, too, was a descendant from the giants. When he taunted Israel, Jonathan, son of David's brother, Shimei, killed him. These 4 were descendants from the giant in Gath and were killed by David and his soldiers. Okay. That is the last of the reading for today. Questions. Okay, question 1. David's mourning for Absalom in chapter 19 alienates his supporters. How does this tension challenge us to consider the theological balance between personal grief and the communal call to reflect God's justice and restoration? I think we see a stark difference here between Absalom's death and the first child that he had with Bathsheba. I blanked for a minute. The first child that he had with Bathsheba, because remember, he mourned and mourned and mourned, and then once the child finally passed, he just got up. He said that he was fasting and praying because while the child was still alive, he had a chance to change God's mind. After the child had passed, it's basically done. That's the Jesse Lucas paraphrase. But we see similar with Absalom, but it's almost like the reverse. Now beforehand, he's dealing with being in battle and stuff like that, but he's in battle, he's calm, collected, everything, and then once he finds out Absalom dies, it's the opposite. This is reflecting to the people that are coming in. As Job said, it's clear to him and clear to everybody else that if everyone else had died and Absalom had lived, he would be happy. That is a stab in the back to the people that were willing to put their lives down for you because of your son, because of Absalom. So I think it can help a lot to focus and put into perspective what we're grieving over and how we're grieving. Question 2. The reconciliation with Shimei and Mephibosheth in chapter 19 shows David extending mercy. How might this act deepen our understanding of forgiveness as a divine attribute that mirrors God's covenant faithfulness? It's similar in the fact that, God extends mercy to us too, right? Especially when we don't deserve it, because we don't deserve it ever, but he still extends that to us. There's a lot of instances like this, I think, where it is reflective to some degree of the mercy that is shown to us from God, the forgiveness that is shown to us from God. And I think we're seeing that reflected in David in these spots. Question 3. The Gibeonites' retribution in chapter 21 ties back to Saul's sin. How does this delayed judgment invite us to reflect on the theological reality of sin's enduring consequences and God's commitment to righteousness across generations? This is one I hadn't really given too much thought on prior to reading it this time. And the idea that the actions of Saul would be still affecting Israel later on. And it's not even like a direct connection, like where Saul did something and then, let's say Saul killed somebody and then their son comes after David 15 years later or something like that. It's not even that. It is a sin of Saul that is having consequences from God several years later. 3 years of a famine, right? It's interesting to see. And I think it's, we have to realize that there can be spiritual consequences in it to things that we do in this world, and it may not always be instant. Same as there can be physical consequences. It may not always be instant. But there are consequences to sin. Point blank, period, end of story. There are consequences to sin always. Sometimes spiritual, sometimes physical, sometimes both. So that is it for the questions. We're again running a little bit over today at a normal time anyways. So appreciate everyone watching, listening. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. That all helps the channel out, and I just enjoy interacting with all you guys in the comments. Whenever I do get comments, I really do enjoy interacting. Don't forget to spread the word. That is the number one way that podcasts spread, is by word of mouth. So if this has been a blessing to you, share it with somebody else. They can jump in and start listening as well. Tomorrow will be the last day in 2 Samuel. It's going to be a good one. It's going to be an interesting one. So make sure you come back and check that out, and we'll see you then. God bless.